Man, this is gonna be tough. This is gonna be real tough. Welcome back, everybody. I'm Music Nerd here. Gonna do a beginner's guide to Motown. Now, Motown is arguably the greatest record label in music history. You know, they spawned stars like the Supremes, Diana Ross, The Temptations, Smokey Robinson, Marvin Gaye, Stevie Wonder, so on, so on. Some of the greatest soul and funk singers to ever walk the earth. And I want to recommend 5 great Motown albums for you to check out this wonderful label's music. Before I get into it, if you enjoyed the channel, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button down below. And if you're a return subscriber, hit the notification bell to be alerted for new content. So the first album I want to recommend is the Supremes' Where Did Our Love Go in 1964. Now, there was a time where a lot of people in Motown thought that the Supremes were a failure. They called them the no-hit Supremes. Really, this is the story of perseverance because, you know, you gotta look at 1964 at the time. It's the British invasion. You know, the Beatles are the hottest thing in the market. Then you have the Rolling Stones, the Who, all that stuff. These 3 black women from Detroit came in and kind of disrupted what was going on in pop music at the time. They became the biggest girl group of the 60s. And so with this album, this proved all the naysayers wrong. Had 3 #1 hits, which is the most for a girl group at that time, and they're the first girl group to have a million-selling album. So they really paved the way for not just girl groups going forward, but really put Motown on the map. They also put the Dozier Holland, the famous songwriting group, on the map. That, you know, that's that type of sound. You know, Motown's kind of been compared as an assembly line, like you have a certain type of sound, and the Supremes kind of started that and they put that to the masses. You know, they went on, you know, national TV, headline concerts, and really Diana Ross became a superstar from then on. Very typical 1960s soul music, a little doo-wop, harmonies are always on point. You know, songs like Where Did Our Love Go, the title track, is a beautiful song. Baby Love is one of the Supremes' most famous songs ever made. Yeah, the Supremes would go on to do great work throughout the decades before breaking up in the 1970s, where Diana Ross had her own solo career. But really, this is where it all started and where things really started to take form. If you're interested in that era of music, 1960s, doo-wop, soul music, this is one of the finest, so check this out. Alright, so we leap forward into the 70s, because honestly, I think Motown's best albums were in the 70s. This is where a lot of these artists started to take creative control. Berry Gordy, obviously, he had a vision for Motown, and one that was to put black music at the top of the pop charts. But a lot of the people that were working there, i.e. Marvin Gaye, was starting to feel constrained by, you know, the limits of just making a pop song. And so Marvin Gaye took inspiration from Vietnam and kind of the Black Panthers and what was going on socio-politically at the moment, and crafted this wonderful masterpiece of an album, What's Going On, which came out in the spring of 1971 and changed soul music forever. Here's the thing, Marvin Gaye was defiant on releasing What's Going On as his first single, and Berry Gordy said, no, it's too political, and Marvin made a bet. He said, listen, if I release this and this becomes a hit, then you gotta let me make the rest of the album. Berry Gordy says, if I release it and it's not a hit, then, you know, you gotta stop with the political stuff. And of course, we all know who won that bet. Going On became the biggest selling single in Motown history, and this led Marvin Gaye to create the rest of this album. Really, there's nothing more to say about something that hasn't really been said. It came out 50 years ago, and it's amazing how it's kind of held up. You know, it's sad to say, but you know, What's Going On, you could play that today and it's still potent. Musically, Marvin Gaye is just taking it to another level, crafting some of his best songs here, not just What's Going On, but Mercy Mercy Me, talking about the ecology. Nobody really talked about the environment at that time, even though in the early 70s, being aware about the environment was becoming a thing, but Marvin Gaye was the first to kind of do it in soul music. And talking about the inner cities with Makes Me Wanna Holler, which is one of my favorite Marvin Gaye songs, and again, another song that's just very potent in today's world 50 years later. And there's also great songs here, Right On, What's Happening Brother. Holy Holy is a beautiful song. Marvin Gaye just like goes for it, just makes just sense, like shivers down your spine. I mean, Marvin Gaye is like one of the greatest singers of all time, regardless of genre. It really makes you connect with his voice and his music. Yeah, this is a masterpiece, and really the success of this album led to other artists within the label to take more creative control, including Stevie Wonder, Diana Ross, so on and so on. So yeah, this album did a lot for soul music, and really was the bar that a lot of soul albums had to go up against for the rest of the decade. Another album I want to talk about is The Temptations. Sky's the Limit also came out in 1971. So The Temptations, like the Supremes, were pretty much the signature band of Motown. They created hit after hit after hit, and then they had some personal turmoil. Members left the group. As the 60s came to a close, people were becoming more socially and politically conscious, of course, you know, with the Black Panther movement and the counterculture. A lot of Motown acts were sick of just playing the same old happy dancing music that appealed mostly to white audiences. So they decided to kind of look out there and become introspective. And really, Sly and the Family Stone, who was not a Motown group, was a huge rock pop band that was making their own different type of music, psychedelic soul, more funk music, and the Temptations kind of leaned in that direction. They started making songs like Cloud 9, just making songs that tackled war and inner cities. And at the dawn of the 70s, this album, Sky's the Limit, was kind of the culmination of that. This was the last album to feature lead singer Eddie Kendricks before he went on to his solo career. And really, the band was becoming very fractured. Drugs were rampant in the studio. It's the same type of psychedelic soul, but they kind of lean more into their old sound too. Lots of ballads. Of course, the most famous song in this album, Just My Imagination, Run Away With Me, became a huge hit for the Temptations. Probably their last biggest hit. But also songs like Smiling Faces Sometimes. It's a longer song, but really showcased Temptations kind of stretching out of their limits, making longer songs, kind of take a little bit more creative control. It's a shame that the band would never be the same after this, because I think they had a ton of great music to go. I mean, hello, the funk era, the disco era, I mean, they could have killed that. But this is kind of like the last remnants of the prime Temptations. So definitely check out this album, Sky's the Limit. I think, you know, Temptations weren't really an album band per se. They were kind of more of a singles band, but in terms of crafting an actual album, this is probably amongst their best. So check it out. Next album I want to talk about, of course, we got to talk about these guys, the Jackson 5. Probably one of the most famous teen bop groups of all time. The OG boy band. You know, you look at NSYNC, BTS, One Direction. I mean, Jackson 5 was the first. And of course, spawned this little known guy named Michael Jackson. You may have heard of him, maybe not, I don't know. ABC, the album that came out in 1970. Jackson 5 wasn't just a group, they were a phenomenon, national phenomenon, beloved by everybody, and spawned #1 hit after #1 hit. Really saved Motown going into the 70s. They were the most successful act in Motown at that time. Yes, bigger than Marvin Gaye, bigger than the Supremes, bigger than Stevie Wonder even. And considering that you had all that talent, that competition, and the fact that these young boys were able to just say, nah, I'm gonna dominate this label. They had that childlike innocence, of course, but man, they were bursting with talent. These guys can play guitars. Michael Jackson, even at 9 years old, sing his ass off. Obviously, the dance moves that they did, the fashion, I mean, they were a hit. And songs like ABC, The Love You Save, I Want You Back, I mean, just monsters. If you just want to listen to just great, solid tunes, really are interested to see where it all started from Michael Jackson with this group. Of course, they went on to make other great music. I especially loved their like kind of Dancing Machine era in the mid-70s where they got more into funk. Really where Michael Jackson became more confident as a singer and dancer as he was maturing. It's the most significant. I mean, it's really the album that ensured that Motown was going to dominate for the rest of the 70s, even as it was competing with other soul labels, other genres in soul music. It really ensured that, no, Motown is still the cream of the crop, and we still got lots of new talent to nurture. So check this album out. Last but not least, I gotta put a Stevie Wonder album in here, and it was so hard choosing one because Stevie Wonder in the 70s, I mean, he was killing people. I mean, he was so much great talent and music in this era. But I'm gonna go with Innervisions, which is the album that had Higher Ground, Living in the City, Don't You Worry About a Thing, some of Stevie's most celebrated hits of his career. This album kind of shows Stevie taking full creative control of his music, coming off the success of Talking Book. And as every album came in the 70s, he began to mature and to produce his own music. Innervisions is probably the definitive Stevie album because it has the ballads, but it also has the socio-politically tracks. He's Mr. Know-It-All, which is at the time referencing Richard Nixon, although he doesn't say his name. You know, this is kind of a subliminal diss, but at the time this album was created, Watergate was in full bloom and Nixon was in the news every night. So Stevie Wonder, admittedly not a fan of Richard Nixon, did another song dissing Richard Nixon, You Haven't Done Nothing, which was another #1 hit with the Jackson 5. Really, Stevie Wonder, this album kind of has it all, and blending into different genres. You know, Don't You Worry About a Thing, kind of doing Latin music. Higher Ground, an amazing, inspiring track that's been covered by so many great groups, including the Red Hot Chili Peppers. It's not even an R&B group. And then you have Living in the City, one of Stevie Wonder's darkest songs, actually. Just talking about being a black man living in the city and all the struggles and the trials and tribulations. It's a long song. There's a sequence in the song where you have this black man who is coming from Mississippi and he's going to New York City and he's happy about it. And then he gets caught up in a drug bust and he goes to jail for 10 years. It's like every time I hear it, it's like very harrowing, but Stevie Wonder paints a realistic portrait of what it was like living as a minority, and just like you're always under watch, you know, no matter what you do, and kind of showing that innocence is, you know, just kind of lost over time and you become more jaded. Masterful track. Yeah, this is an amazing album cover referencing Stevie Wonder being blind, his inner visions, seeing the world in a different light. It's an amazing album. I mean, I could have chosen Songs in the Key of Life, which is my favorite Stevie album, Talking Book, Fulfilling Its Last one. Now I'm telling you guys, Stevie Wonder, I mean, he owned the 70s, man. He had a lot of great work. But Innervisions, I feel, is, if you want to check out Stevie at his best, I think this is the album you should check out. So yeah, those are my 5 Motown albums that I would recommend. Of course, Motown would have success in the 80s and 90s. Maybe I would tackle that in a different video. There's so much great music in Motown. If you haven't heard any Motown music, just please check it out. So much great R&B, soul, funk music that's ever been created. YouTube recommends these 2 videos to check out after this one. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Till next time, peace.